My name is Lara Quie, and I believe that we only have this one short life, and we need to live our best life now. I want lawyers to learn important lessons from movers and shakers in the legal industry. The mission of this podcast is to empower and inspire you to create a better life for yourself. Whether that's by finding a mentor, paying more attention to your well-being, developing your skills as a lawyer, or even moving forward in a new direction. You can find my daily posts on LinkedIn, so please follow me there. I do hope that you will enjoy this conversation and take away some real value. Thank you for listening. Hello and welcome to episode 39 of the Legal Genie Podcast with me, your host, Lara Quie. And today I have a very special guest, my colleague, Anthony Carroll. He is a practice director at 20 Essex, and he has a great wealth of experience that spans over 20 years working in chambers. So it's really exciting to have you here today, Ant.
Thank you, Lara. Good to be doing this outside our usual dynamic of colleagues.
Exactly. You are the first and bravest person to be on the Legal Genie podcast. There are a few people who have said they're interested, but nobody has stepped up to the plate. So congratulations on being the very first.
Thanks for having me, Lara.
Let's start with your childhood and where you grew up.
Yeah. So I was born in Edgware in North London. At the time, my mum worked in a department store and my dad was a toolmaker. I've got one older sibling, a sister, Louise, who's 4 years older than me. And I had a very happy childhood. I didn't leave North London until I was 27, actually. But there's so much to do growing up in London as well. So I never really felt like I had to. I came from parents that were very hardworking. There were times where my dad would have two jobs, so toolmaker by day, and would have another job in the evening. Naturally, I had a very close relationship with my mother, who was around quite a lot, and still do. Quite often, my partner, Emma, and my sister will say I'm a bit of a mummy's boy in that regard. And going to school in Edgware, I really enjoyed my years in school. I was very social as a child. Perhaps I focused more on the social side of school than the academic part of it. Many teachers would often say that to my parents about me, but thankfully it worked out in the end for me.
Indeed, it's a very important part of your role at the moment, that sociable side.
Exactly.
But just thinking about that family, it doesn't sound like the sort of family involved in the legal industry. So what actually inspired you to become a barrister's clerk?
Good question. So the link was my sister at the time was set on becoming a solicitor. So being 4 years older, at the time I'd finished A-levels, she was coming to the end of her LPC, looking to be a trainee lawyer. She was always the academic one in the family. I did my A-levels, but paused on making a decision whether to go to university because I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I didn't have savings to go travelling, which would have been my first choice. And my parents, being the hard workers that they were, said, you're not going to sit around at home. If you're not going to go to uni, then you have to go and work. And at this time, so 20 years ago, there were often job adverts in the Evening Standard. And so I was looking at newspapers for full-time work, and it was a mix between accountancy trainee, insurance brokers. I really wanted to work in the city, which for some people, particularly in this day, seems quite odd. But I was fascinated with people that were going into central London, that were working, and I thought, this is something I'd like to do. And then I saw an advert for a junior clerk position in the Evening Standard, and I had no idea what it was. So I turned to my sister to say, okay, yeah, you understand law. Can you explain to me what barristers are and what a clerk is? And she had some knowledge, but couldn't tell me too much. She could explain what barristers do and the clerks would manage their diary and help get them work. And this was a time where there wasn't as much information on the internet as there is now. So part of me getting an interview at the set of chambers, a lot of it was trying to blag my way through the interview process, which I wasn't very good at. And so I wasn't successful getting the job. But they did say, if I'm serious about a career in clerking, then there is something called the Institute of Barristers Clerks. And at the time, you could send a cheque for £10, and it was cheque, no online payments. And in return, you would get by post every 2 weeks available jobs in chambers. So that's what I did. And then shortly a few weeks later, open jobs for junior clerks came through the post, and there was a job at 29 Bedford Row, which was a family set of chambers, and the other for a junior clerk position at Atkin Chambers. I applied for both, and it was 29 Bedford Row that offered me the job first, and that's what made my decision. So it could have turned out quite differently had I gone to Atkin or One Essex at the time, but that was the path. And 29 Bedford Row offered me first, and that's how my career began.
Wow, the rest is history, as they say. But in those days, what was the role of a junior clerk? What did you actually have to do on a daily basis?
It's such an interesting job as a junior clerk, and I think it was only when I actually started up in the role that I realised how much I enjoyed the job. So it was a team of 5 clerks at the time, and me being the most junior. And particularly in a team that small, you realise that you all are responsible for your roles. And if you're not doing your job, you're like a clog in the machine. If I'm not performing, then the others can't perform. And so I took a lot of pride in that. The role was doing a lot of the running around, dealing with the post first thing in the morning, at the end of the day, doing all of the court runs. And at the time, being the only junior clerk, if I had 5 barristers in court, I would have to deliver the papers and often leave their papers outside the courtroom door to make sure I can then get to the other court buildings to ensure all of the papers are delivered. And so that was learning how to manage my time with that. I feel like my quality as an electrician improved. I was changing all of the light bulbs in the buildings, replacing fuses. I found as a junior clerk, I was that maintenance person as well, making the teas and coffees for conferences. It was such a varied job, and I was incredibly fit because I wouldn't have time to sit around. And then slowly, as I started progressing, I could spend a bit more time at the desk on the case management system, entering papers. It was so fascinating. And every day, walking around the temple, going to the Royal Courts of Justice, trying to navigate and find my way to all sorts of obscure offices that I'd have to deliver something to. I really did enjoy it.
Yeah, it sounds very physical. I can see you now with those trolleys full of big boxes and files and everything. But yeah, I can imagine that was pretty exhausting. You must have slept very well in those days.
I did. And I think the other thing in those days is there were fax machines as well, which we don't have anymore. And quite often a brief would come through via the fax machine. And then if it suddenly runs out of paper, which is my job to refill, my barrister's only got half of their papers. And so I was then running around, making sure it was all filled up. And then the fax would start from page 1 again. And these things were incredibly slow, particularly when you've got deadlines to work to, or I've got a train to catch and I'm just pleading with paper just to start coming through. But it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it sounds quite exciting. And I think a lot of the younger lawyers who are listening to this will be quite amazed by the concept of fax machines and papers and all of this in the technical age of everything just so immediate. But then after 29 Bedford Row, you moved on to Essex Court Chambers. So tell us a bit about your time there.
The big difference is when I went to Essex Court Chambers, firstly, the number of barristers. As a set, it was huge compared to where I'd come from. And it was the step into the commercial world and international arbitration. At 29 Bedford Row, the barristers didn't do international work. So that whole aspect of what a barrister does was completely new to me and fascinating. Seeing barristers traveling out to other jurisdictions, particularly in Singapore, I thought, wow, people are using barristers all over the world. And I was clerking for the barristers that really were the top of their field there. And so with that, the expectation around professionalism, the work that you do, the presentation of everything from speaking to people to how you write emails, the level of standards were high. And it really taught me a lot about that and making sure that the finishing product, what I deliver to barristers and to clients, has to be exceptional. And so it really taught me a lot about standards. There was a large and a quality clerk's room at the time that I was at Essex Court. And so I really did learn a lot quite quickly from people that are still in senior positions now. And yeah, I think those were the real kind of wake up parts. And I just felt, okay, this is a huge kind of international operation here, which I'm now a part of.
Yeah, it sounds like it made a big impression on you. And you were there for about 6 years.
Yes.
Tell me about why you moved on and where you went next.
Yes, it's quite interesting. I always think about a conversation that I had with my dad at the time, and I would be working in the clerk's room with the senior clerk at the time at Essex Court, David Grief, and I would be preparing itineraries for international trips he was doing. And I remember speaking to my dad. He'd ask, am I still enjoying the career? I said, yeah. And actually, the senior clerk is traveling around the world and he's out seeing clients. He's out seeing solicitors with the hope to generate work. And yeah, this was something I hadn't really seen before. And my dad said, is that something that you want to do? And I said, well, actually, yeah, it's the part of the career that I hadn't really had experience with, because at Essex Court, I think the client-facing side was very much done by the senior clerks. And it was a role of the aspect that I really wanted to develop. And so the opportunity had come up at Keating Chambers, and in the job description, it said that there is an expectation that in this role you would be doing marketing and client-facing activity. And that was the real draw for me, because it was the part that I wanted to explore more. I wasn't sure if that would be part of the job that I liked, but would really want to try it out. And so that was the driver for the switch. And the senior clerk at Keating Chambers at the time, someone called Nick Child. And I think if anyone that's ever met Nick will know that he is client-facing, client-focused in his role. And so then being able to learn from him in that aspect of the job was a real privilege. And it changed probably the type of professional that I am, because I absolutely loved being face-to-face with clients and understanding actually what are they looking for in barristers, the bar, what do they want from clerks. And I became a much more rounded professional myself. And yeah, it was at the time, it was a very good move for me and really paved the way for the person I am now.
And after that, you joined 20 Essex, where you're now a practice director. But tell us about that move and also your role as a practice director.
Yeah, when the opportunity at 20 Essex came up, it was too good an opportunity to pass over. Career-wise, it was a natural progression for me. It was more of a leadership role. And plus, the role at 20 Essex seemed to play to my strengths in terms of managing the energy and infrastructure group, which I'd been developing my expertise at for the years at Keating Chambers. And also 20 Essex is very strong in international arbitration. But I also liked the opportunity where I'll be able to expand my client base. Being client focusing at Keating Chambers, you get to know really well the construction and energy clients. whereas this was now an opportunity to broaden that into more commercial areas, and which I was very excited about. Set has a great reputation. And I was also excited about the opportunity to work with Gemma Tagg, who's the CEO at 20 Essex. But Gemma came to the bar or chambers from a different background, as she was previously in private practice, then worked in client relationships at a law firm. And I hadn't worked under a leader that had come from that side before. And so I felt, from my own experience, I'm now learning from someone that brings completely different skills to the role, which learning from that person would, again, make me more rounded and more knowledgeable in myself. So it was a no-brainer, really. And I've really enjoyed the role and chambers ever since joining. And I do like the aspect of being more senior, being able to manage others and to help the development of other people in the team, particularly the practice management team, but also, obviously, the barristers themselves, and having 20 years experience, being able to pass that on to others. That's something that I really enjoy about the role, and it's something that I think is important for people to do. So I get to fulfill all that in my role as a practice director at 20 Essex.
And the clerk's room is always such a hive of activity and energy. Tell me a bit about, what you enjoy most about that and how you managed to survive during the COVID work from home time.
Yeah, the energy in the clerk's room is great. I think it's important for us to be in the same room most of the time together, particularly when others are learning from you. I can be having conversations with people, and I remember from my own learning, hearing conversations that senior people were having. You think, this is how they're addressing barristers, this is how they're speaking to clients. The knowledge you can pick up from just eavesdropping at some point. And it's important that carries on for the next generation of practice managers. And it was difficult to replicate that during COVID. And it was important that we had regular meetings where we would all be on a call. It's very difficult for, as everyone I think experienced, you can't all speak at once when you're on Zoom or a Teams call, whereas in the clerk's room, there are more of those conversations that are happening at the same time as others. But we managed it very well. We stayed connected with each other, and working from home, it does have its place and serves a purpose, which I think generally there are times that the team are happy to be able to do with certain tasks. But we ensure now that there is a day where everyone from the clerk's room is in chambers on one day as an anchor day, as it were. And I think that's a really good way for us to be moving forward. And it's working well.
So thinking about any young people interested in becoming a barrister's clerk, what advice have you got for some sixth formers who are thinking about it right now?
I've always said, if you see it as a step into a career as a lawyer, that's not what it is. If you want to work with people, if you want a role where you're going to get responsibility, then you should definitely do it. To get information, there is more information on the internet about the role now than there was when I started. So first port of call, to not make the mistakes that I did, try and get as much information as you can first. And of course, on the internet, where you have the IBC, you also have the LPMA, which will have information on the role, and speaking to people. I think finding out as much about the job first that you can is always helpful. And one of the powers of LinkedIn, particularly if people are looking for jobs, you can find practice managers, clerks on the internet. And I don't think, if anyone ever sent a message to me just asking a bit about the job, never would I ignore it. I would feel, wow, someone's taken the initiative here. And always happy when people reach out, because it's a great profession. And I'd encourage people from all backgrounds that do want to work, if they have an interest, then to explore it.
And you've been in chambers for so long, you must have come across a few eccentric barristers and various people with interesting traits. Do you have any fun stories or anecdotes that you could share?
I can think of one that sticks out, and it was one when I was a fairly junior clerk, and I won't say the barrister, but it was quite fun. There was an arbitration taking place at the IDRC, and the hearing went over into a weekend. So I was the person that, I suppose, drew the short straw that would have to come in to ensure the barristers' papers were taken to court and everything was set up for them. And so on the Saturday morning, I got to chambers and went to the barrister's room, and I was fully suited. And then I saw the barrister in their tweed trousers, a jumper which appeared to have some ducks embroidered on it. And the barrister looked at me and said, "Anthony, why on earth are you in a suit?" And I said, "I'm taking you to a hearing, and the suit is generally the proper court dress for me." And the barrister said, "But this is the weekend. We shouldn't be working on a weekend, and I don't expect to wear a suit on the weekend, so you shouldn't have to either." I said, "Okay, I'm in the suit now. That's fine. Noted." So I got the barrister's papers together and took them to the hearing. And as I've gone through the doors and I've looked around, and everyone set up in the hearing are all in suits. The tribunal are in their suits, the other side. And I'm panicking for the barrister then, who's not come in yet. And I'm thinking, he's not got the memo. Part of the clerk's role, getting the papers to court, but making sure your barrister's appropriately dressed. And I thought, this is going to be my error here. So I'm frantically then getting my mobile out, thinking, I've not got the Silk's number in my phone. How am I going to get a message to him? And as I'm getting anxious about that, barrister's walked into the room, and everyone's looked at him because stood out as the only person not in a suit. And it was as if everyone else in the room was just invisible to him. He just walked straight over to where he was going to be sitting for the hearing, checked that his papers were set up, said fine, and sat down and just waited for it to start, as if he's just doubling down in his position. And I thought, okay, that takes some confidence and some front, but, you're leading. I think it set a marker down. It was quite interesting. I told that story to someone a few years later that was close to the case, and they had some insight, and they said, yeah, I remember that. At the time the hearing was arranged, it was fixed for the tribunal's convenience, to which my barrister was not pleased with and did not want to work over the weekend. So as a protest, his plan was always to turn up and not wear a suit, which I didn't know at the time, but it was funny then telling someone that story and could fill that in. And I thought, fair enough to you.
That's a great anecdote. And I can just picture it now, particularly the jumper with the ducks on it. He'd rather be out shooting grouse or something this weekend in his tweeds. Yeah, very stylish and rather traditional. But let us talk about the very interesting fact that you are practice director by day and hardcore band singer by night. Yeah. Tell us about your side career as a touring rock star with your band TRC and the importance of having a creative outlet.
Yeah, thank you. We're actually coming up to our 20-year anniversary next year. Similar time when I was looking for roles in chambers, I started a hardcore band with friends that I went to school with. I got into heavy music at around 13 and always wanted to be in a band, to be with friends, not in terms of thinking we would have any type of success. Part of it was just, we go to gigs all the time. If we're in a band, we won't have to pay to get in anymore if we can open, which in reality was a driver. And we all grew up, lived in London, and the band was very much a focal point for us to talk about things in society and our lives affected us, and just to be honest through music. And I was writing the lyrics alongside the other frontman. And so it was good just to be able to, I'm not going to say it's poetry, but to write things down through music, and to have something outside of work and life and to be able to play, it was really key for us and important. And so, we've been doing that for 20 years, and we did get some success and a bit of a following to our surprise. And so we've played some pretty big festivals. We've toured over the UK and across Europe. And so for the 20th anniversary, it's the anniversary of our first ever EP. And so for the first time, we are now going to play the songs from start to finish in order in our set list. And we're going to do a limited number of shows. So there'll be some in the UK, some across Europe. I'm speaking to someone in Thailand who wants to bring us over to Bangkok, which would be quite fun. And yeah, to have something where being creative, writing music, playing music, it's so good for well-being, to have an escape, something that's completely different, but also a way to continue to interact with my friends and the friendships I've made around the world through music and through the band. It's so nice to be able to do. And I'd certainly encourage anyone, whether it's music or whether it's art or writing, to have something else that they can take some pride in and be able to do. Yeah, it's really good for you.
I think that having a hobby is actually quite difficult for many lawyers and other people in the legal industry. And that is always something I emphasize to them, to not give up on their hobbies. It's so great to have, as you say, something else in terms of a distraction, something you have a passion for. And for you, such a great social opportunity, an opportunity to travel, bond with your friends, certainly on your Facebook page. I've seen the TRC Facebook page, and you guys look like you're having the best time, you with your bandmates. Not sure about the music.
It's not for everyone.
It's not for everyone, I will say that. But it just looks like so much fun. But let's move on. You're a real family guy. You've got 2 children, and it's hard being a working parent and everything like that. But tell me about the very rare genetic condition that your daughter Elise has developed.
Yeah, I'm fortunate to have 2 amazing children, 6 years old and 2 years old. My youngest, Elise, so at 20 months old, she was diagnosed with a condition called retinoblastoma. It's a very rare type of cancer that affects the eye. And it was my partner, Emma, that had first noticed the symptoms. So she was diagnosed in September. And since then, it's been a battle to save her eyesight, to save her eye, and also to be cured of cancer. So she's had systemic chemotherapy in the last 4 months of last year. That treatment finished. The treatment went well. People said, as cancers go, it's quite a good one, if there is such a thing, to have as a child, because yes, it affects the eyes, but it's unlikely to spread anywhere else in the body. So for us, it was right. We can focus on the eyes, and the thought of it spreading anywhere else that might have been at the back of our minds starts to go. And so then you're down to, let's save the eye. And she's lost vision in one eye where there is a large tumour, and that's where the focus for the systemic chemotherapy was. She has a small tumour in her right eye as well, but where it is, it's not affected her vision. And actually, having good vision in that one eye gives her about 80% vision overall. So you can't tell that she is blind in one eye, and nor could you tell by the amount of energy that she has throughout the treatment. She's been brilliant, and children are incredibly resilient, and what people go through, particularly with cancer treatments as an adult life, is very different in comparison to children. And I've spent a lot of time in Great Ormond Street where she's receiving her treatment. It's not a place that as a parent you want to be, but in the circumstances, if your child is really sick, that's exactly where you want to be having your care. And the nurses, the doctors have been incredible throughout. And her treatment's still ongoing. We're not out of the woods yet by a long shot. In fact, tomorrow we're back in Great Ormond Street because she's now having something called intra-arterial chemotherapy. So it's a type of chemo that goes directly into the eye. So yeah, she had a relapse probably 6 to 8 weeks ago now. And so the treatment is ongoing. But she's in nursery a few days a week. So she's got her friends group as well. And we just take each course of chemo each day at a time. And you've got to think positively in these type of situations. And it's really put a lot of things in perspective as well, and the importance of family. And everyone around me, you and particularly everyone at 20 Essex, have been hugely supportive whilst we've been going through this. And it really does help when the people that you work with are supporting you and making sure that you're with your family throughout this time. It's made a very difficult situation that bit easier.
I'm glad to hear that progress is being made and you're getting the very best care. So 14th to the 20th of May is World Retinoblastoma Awareness Week. And I know that Emma was able to identify this in Elise just by looking at her eyes. So could you tell us a little bit about the sort of things people need to look out for if they were to notice anything a bit unusual about small children and their eyes?
Yeah, so around 70% of the children that have a visible symptom of it is this white glow behind the pupil. So Emma had noticed it, which at the time was only visible under certain lights, but it was effectively a white glow behind one of her pupils, which is where a large tumour was and had detached her retina. And that's why we were seeing it. And it is unusual. And I know people say whenever you see a symptom, don't type it into Google because it's going to throw up the worst thing, which it did on this occasion. But in truth, when we went to our GP first, they couldn't see it. And they'd not seen this symptom or heard of retinoblastoma really before. So they weren't able to diagnose it. So it wasn't until a bit later on that we took Elise to Moorfields, because having seen it then, I thought, let's just get it checked by an eye specialist. So I would say looking out for the white glow and trusting your instinct. If you feel like something's not right, take it further, because I wouldn't wish it on anyone, but you don't want to be right and trust a GP or someone else to say that actually there's nothing wrong there. So go with your instinct, I would say. And yeah, that is a symptom that is most common that people will see. Other symptoms are redness around the eye. Poor vision can also be a symptom. These can be symptoms for other things as well, but things to look out for.
I think that's so helpful. And particularly, as you say, we all know our children really well. And so that gut instinct where you go first to a generalist, and when you've got something rare, admittedly, they're not going to spot it if they haven't had that experience. But yeah, trusting your gut to go to Moorfield Hospital and specialists, or whenever there's something with your child and you just know there's something else going on, to go and check that out. So I know Chambers are doing some great fundraising activities. I think there was a cake sale or some fun things. It's great to raise more awareness about World Retinoblastoma just generally, because this is rare, but it's great if somebody can have that knowledge so that they can at least investigate if they do see something unusual in little children's eyes. Thank you so much for being on the show. And what is the best way for people to reach out to you if they want to get in touch?
LinkedIn is probably the easiest way, and I think we're all on that. So do reach out on LinkedIn. I'm going to be taking on the 3 Peaks Challenge, so walking the 3 highest peaks in the United Kingdom in August and doing it within 24 hours. So I'm doing this with some friends to raise money for the charity Checked, which is the one that supported my family and others who have children with retinoblastoma. So I've started training for that with some long walks at the moment. And so I'll have a link there. And also, I think for anyone in particular wanting to follow Elise's story, we have an Instagram page called I Spy Bright Eyes. And there we document the full story and kind of progress throughout treatments. And so, yeah, that's where I am and the best ways to get to me.
Fantastic. We'll put all those details in the show notes so that people don't need to worry about making any notes, and they'll be able to click and just find those. So thank you so much for speaking to me today, Ant.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me, Lara. Brilliant.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Legal Genie podcast. Please leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. It helps other people in the legal industry find the show. And don't forget to share this with anyone you think would benefit from listening to it as well. Until next time, have a magical week ahead.